And he was trying to do sneak attacks too. Like, and then that's when you killed him. Right. And you're like, I did not do it. Like, oh, sorry. I just started the recording now. Yeah, it's just wild that you're like, how did this happen?
Yeah. It was just, things had to turn a certain way for this to go this way.
Yeah.
You know, I was just a normal mom. Right?
I know. Yeah.
Just like, you know, just a normal, you know, my kids were in school. I went to work. I was just a normal mom, basically.
Right. And then I can only imagine as things kept progressing, because it's such a long, detailed story too. Like, say if there's a new court case or a new, like you're revisiting it, like to explain it all to people in court. Like, I'm just sure. Oh, I can only imagine.
Crazy.
Right.
It was just so my arrest very, very difficult because, as you know, I was raised with privilege. I was at the jail where I was arrested, but I had to be transported down to Wayne County to the jail in downtown Detroit.
Wow.
This was very, very frightening to me. So as we're driving down there, I was basically having a panic attack because I didn't know what to expect. My hands were handcuffed behind me. I was in the car with two other felons.
Oh, really?
I had no idea what was going to happen to me when I got there.
Yeah.
The Wayne County Jail has a reputation of being a terrible, terrible place.
Yeah.
It just happened that the place that I lived, it was in the suburbs, but it was part of Wayne County. So that's where I went. When I got there, I was taken to a holding place and they stripped you down of all your clothes. They made sure you weren't carrying any contraband or weapons. They gave you a uniform. They gave you a bedroll and a wool blanket, and that was it. And they put you into this, what they called a rock. They called it a rock because it was basically one area where the officers had an open window and they could watch several people, several cells all at the same time. And so that's where they put me. Now, say that, you know, I don't really know how to say this, but I was not raised around people of color. Okay. Basically, I was, you know, I went to an all white school. I was raised in an all white neighborhood in the suburbs. You know, I was, you know, I only had met a few people of color in my whole life. So it wasn't, you know, I was very, very, I would say afraid. Basically, I was afraid. I didn't know what to expect. So when I got there, I started to meet people, and it turned out that I found out that they were very much like me, very much in the same boat as I was. I met several people that I remained friends with for a long, long, long time, into my incarceration in prison. So it was, the fear was unfounded, but it was because I basically didn't know what to expect. And from what you hear, when people talk about a place like that, it's quite frightening. So my ride down there, I would have to say, was the most frightening thing I ever had to experience.
Wow.
Because I just didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
After I'd been there for a few days, you know, and I made friends, then I started to relax a little bit because, you know, I had been under such stress for months and months and months, where the police were following me. My stalker was following me. Everything had just culminated, and finally they arrested me, and I knew I was innocent. But basically I didn't have anything to worry about it at that point. The worst had happened.
Right.
So, I remember my parents coming to visit me, and I remember my siblings coming to visit me, and thinking, I remember saying to my brother, I always thought you would end up in here, not me. So it was, hard. It was very hard. So I was in my cell with some friends. We were talking, and we decided that the only way you got to go out of your cell was if you went to a religious service. And I was raised a Catholic. I didn't want to go to church. I was like as far away from God as a person possibly could be. I didn't have any relationship with God at all. And basically I just wanted to get out of my cell. So I said, yes, I'll go with you guys. So we went to this religious service, which was, just down the hall into a bigger room. And I remember hearing a song that was sung by one of the inmates who was raised by her grandmother and was in the jail for murder herself. And she got up and she was singing this song. And I just felt this whole peace come over me. Like I can't really explain it. Just, I felt like God was talking to me, not just talking to my heart and letting me know that everything was going to be all right. It was, I didn't know what to do at this point. I didn't have any idea. I wasn't religious. I had never even picked up a Bible in my life. So when I had gotten back to my cell, the only books that are in the bookcase in that area of the rock, romance novels and Bibles. I decided that I would pick up a Bible and start to read for the first time in my whole life. Being a Catholic, we were never given Bibles. We were never read a Bible. I never even picked one up, and I didn't know anything about it. So I started to read it. I started to read the Psalms because they seemed, easy to read. And I read Psalm 17. And it just turned out that Psalm 17 was the prayer for an innocent man. It says that God will vindicate you. Okay. And it just is a comforting psalm that I read over and over and over again. And I, from that point, started to say the rosary because that's how I was brought up. And there was a scripture in there that said, it was in Mark 11:22. If you have faith in God and believe that the things that you ask for, you will receive them if you believe in faith. But you must forgive anyone who has ever hurt you. I decided, well, okay, if this Bible is the truth, then I should be able to ask God to get me out of this. I should be able to believe that he's going to deliver me from this mess. I was innocent, and I just felt like, okay, if this is true and I can ask whatever I ask in faith, then I should be able to receive what I've asked for. I started, first of all, I had no bond. It was a first-degree murder charge. I had a first-degree murder charge. So there was no bond for me. So that was my first prayer. I first prayed that God would give me a bond, which is kind of, when you look back on it, okay, that was kind of silly, but I was naive and I didn't understand. And that's what I did. I prayed and I prayed and I believed. And part of believing is telling other people what you believe. And so I believe I told everyone who would listen to me, God's going to give me a bond. God's going to give me a bond. I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
So lo and behold, after I had been there for a few months, I had a bond hearing.
Wow.
Yeah. And
just out of nowhere, like they just kind of announced, like,
petitioned the court for a bond hearing, and she granted it.
Wow. So
we went to this hearing, and I thought, well, okay, if I get a bond, it's going to be for like a $1 gajillion. There's no way that, but part of the scripture was you have to believe. So I just kept saying, and I kept believing that God was going to do this.
Yeah.
So we get into this hearing, and my dad's sitting there, and he's giving me good thumbs up signs. And we have this hearing and the judge gives me $150,000 bond. And 10% of that is $15,000. And that is exactly the amount of money my dad had brought with him.
Wow.
So I was released from the county jail after, I believe it was like 82 days I had been there. And I was just on cloud nine.
Yeah.
God delivered me. I was like, I believed that God had done this, and I was so happy.
Yeah.
And I was home and I said, thank you, God. Thank you, God. I decided, that this was, this was great. God had delivered me from jail, and it was over. And I about my life. I decided I had met up with the police officer, the sergeant in the little town that had warned me about my stalker. And we started to get together and we started to date. And I just went on with my life like nothing had ever happened. I had no, I stayed with my sister for a while, and then I moved in with my new boyfriend, and we lived for probably about, I want to say it was 2 years. And he was a sergeant at a police department, so I felt safe. And he was, he would tell me things about what was going on, and I kind of forgot basically about this trial that was hanging over my head. I never prayed again, never picked up a Bible, never talked to God, never, I just thought there's just no way that I could ever be convicted of this because I was innocent. The fact that, maybe a policeman could make it look like he'd proved something, but he really didn't prove anything. A trial is a different thing. They're going to rely on real evidence, of which there was no real evidence. And, that was kind of how I thought about it. And I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't afraid. It was just something I had to go through. So we went to court. So the new boyfriend had a cousin who was an attorney. And he would take my case pro bono for no money because I didn't really have any. I was just a single mom, and, my kids were being taken care of by family members. And I was worried about, how I was going to pay for an attorney. And I knew that a court appointed attorney was not the best way to go because those guys are overworked. And so I thought this was really the best way. This was a criminal attorney and he would know what to do. So this would work out best in the situation. I thought he would give me a good defense. He petitioned the court to have a trial with no jury. So this is called a bench trial, and the judge is the one who decides your fate. And in my thinking, there was no real evidence. There was no way for a prosecution to put on a dog and pony show and have a judge believe all that. Where a jury, they could say and do anything to make them think a certain way. I just thought it was a better idea. So the one thing with no jury is the judge will give you a trial when she has the time. Okay. So we would go in after about a year. It was probably a year after I'd been released. We would go in for a day of trial, and then something would come up and we'd go another 3 months and we'd have another day or two of trial. So it was broken up into pieces and bits, a day here, a day there. The judge had to go shopping. So we ended court that day. There was so many things. It was never a cohesive trial where everything was all together. And finally, we went in to hear her verdict. This was in November of 1993, November the 5th. We went in at, I think it was 9 o'clock in the morning. We sat there all day, the whole family. sat there all day. She came out a couple times and got some things from the lawyers. It's like she had never even thought about the case and was deciding right now. Finally, 6 o'clock at night in November, it's pitch dark outside. And she finally comes into the court and we're all sitting there waiting and waiting. And she starts reading this thing. And I don't know if you've ever had an out of body experience, but I don't remember too much of what happened. Mm-hmm. All I do remember is your mother in the background crying. And when I started to think, why is Mary Ann crying? And it didn't dawn on me that this wasn't going my way. It was I was being convicted of first-degree murder and arson. So finally she banged the gavel and I stood up and they handcuffed me and took me out. I don't even remember what happened after that, other than they put me in a room by myself. I went back to the county jail. I not even believing that this could ever happen to me. It was so beyond my wildest imagination that this could ever happen. Yeah. It just was so, I was dumbstruck. I couldn't speak. I could barely talk. I went, I was in a fog. I just was, I don't remember too much of the next few days. Mm-hmm. They put me back in a cell by myself, all the way down at the very end where no one else was. I had in my hand, in my coat, in my pocket of the dress I was wearing, I had a bottle of pills, sedatives, because I had gone to the doctor because I was having heart palpitations. So he had given me Ativan. Mm-hmm. And I had them in my pocket, and for some reason they didn't take them from me. Mm-hmm. It just worked out that way that I had them in my hand in the cell, and I was going to end my life. That's the only thing I could think of to do, because in my mind, I thought it would be so much better for my children to say mom was dead than to say the mom was convicted of a murder in prison. So this is basically how I thought. Yeah. And I don't know if you believe in angels or not. I don't. I do. I know now that I do. Mm. There was this lady in the jail area. She was another inmate, and I have to say she took care of me for the next 4 days. Mm-hmm. She brought me food to eat. She took care of me. She took the pills away and gave them to the officer. She basically took care of me because I couldn't take care of myself. Mm-hmm. This is hard. So I don't remember her name. All I know was she was Black and she had blonde hair, blondish red hair. I can't remember her name. Mm-hmm. But I know she took care of me, and I know God sent her to do that because I wouldn't be alive if she wasn't there. So I started off in the county jail, and then this was on November 5th. On December 30th, I was sentenced to life with no parole for first-degree murder and arson. I got I don't know, 3 to something for the arson, but it didn't matter at that point because it was a life sentence. So I stayed in the county jail for my first Thanksgiving, but not Christmas. By Christmas, I was at the maybe, I don't even remember. It's very hard for me to remember this part because I was so devastated. It was, it took me weeks to come back to being of a sound mind, where I felt, had all my faculties. I was, just numb, just totally numb and in shock.
Yeah.
So I remember going to the prison in a van, and it was so very cold, and I didn't have a coat, and I just sat there in my uniform and in this cold van, and went to this prison that I didn't know anything about. And they dropped me off, and they put me in quarantine in the prison. And it was very, very hard, because in prison, they treat you, in quarantine, they have a job to do, and that is to get you to know that you are not in control of your own life anymore. Mm-hmm. They are total control. So you have to come out of your room and ask them to go to the bathroom, and walk down this long hall to the bathroom. And they can say no, they can say yes, you can go to the bathroom. No, you can't, go back to your room. They are in control of your life now. And it's very hard to come to terms with that. Yeah. It's a very difficult time. You're not allowed to walk around as your own. Your meals are, you go to a certain place to eat, and you're in that area for, I want to say, a good month. So they put you into a housing unit. So they give you your medical checkup. They had a woman come into this unit and give everyone a medical checkup, to the quarantine, and got uniforms and got bedding and stuff. And it was very difficult, because you started to meet people and talk to people, and I realized that I had a life sentence. Nobody else had a life sentence but me in this area, except for this one other lady. And she turned out had I think 3 life sentences. So no, she had 2 life sentences. So the way we talked about it was, she had 1 and I had 1, and there was 1 for Jesus.
Yeah.
And we talked, and we got to be very, very good friends. And it turned out that she would be my roommate for many, many years. And we became very good friends. Her mom and dad were sharecroppers, and she had a lot of stories she would tell me. We became very, very close. So then basically I started to pray again. I started to read the Bible again. I was once we got out of quarantine, because my friend Mel had life sentences also, we both went to the same housing unit, which was a housing unit with maybe 50 rooms on the first floor and 50 rooms on the second floor. And the whole housing unit was surrounded by a big barbed wire fence. So it was prison within a prison. It wasn't in general population. You couldn't get out of that place. There were bars on the windows. There were bars on the doors. They locked you in your room and you couldn't come out. So, but everyone was in their own little room. So you didn't have a roommate or anything like that. And you did have a bathroom in your room. So that made it a little bit easier. I didn't have to worry about anyone else, because the people in this housing unit were all the worst of the worst of the worst. And that's the people that have killed, and just horrible. I mean, I was there with them, so I was I was the worst of the worst of the worst.
And which is so wild, just to think, like, everything that happened, it's like, and I'm like,
and here I am.
Yeah.
With at the time I'm thinking, these are horrible people. I realized, oh, they think you're horrible too.
Oh gosh.
It was at least the least you could say was that it was a rude awakening.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's just wild.
things about prison is that it works on it has a different society than the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because basically most people in prison are gay.
Oh yeah. I've heard that. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know anything about that. Naive. I didn't know gay for the stay. I didn't know any of it.
Gay for the stay.
But as
Oh
it
my
works,
gosh.
hierarchy in prison, they have, whole families of people
Mm-hmm.
that start out, they have it's very, very different. It's a whole different society than the world, and it works, and the officers are aware. They know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They go along with it. It's part of that society. That's all I can say. It's not looked down upon. It's just how
it's still humans in like an institution. So like humans are going to do what they do. And I mean, if someone's in prison for full life or X amount of years, like you can't just anticipate they're just only going to stay in their cell and not do something like that. I feel like, so it makes sense. Like
it makes perfect sense when you really think about it, that people are people and they're human beings. And,
I can imagine it's just so interesting going into it. Like, I don't know the rules.
I don't know any of the rules. Well, they're quick to tell you the rules, and one of the things is that you can't trust anyone because you don't know, what they're, because they are capable of everything and anything, and you just don't know, So one lady will come up and say, "Would you like me to fold your laundry?" Well, no. I'm afraid to do anything, or after you've been there a few years, you know who you can trust and who you can't. Right. And it just a little bit easier. But in the beginning, I was just like a fish out of water. I can't even tell you. It was hard. And the only friends I had were the people that I met in the county jail. And they were in general population, not so bad as me.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So in general, was it like hard to make friends? I know you just described how it's like, who can I trust? But
it really wasn't hard to make friends.
Yeah.
Depending on what you did. So right away, quick, I got a job. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, they put me to work in the graphic arts department. So I could leave my enclosed prison within a prison and go out into general population and work every day. Got out of
maximum security.
Maximum security. Yes.
Okay.
I got out of there. I was only there for less than a month. Mm-hmm. And I think they realized that I wasn't a threat to anyone. So they moved me into general population. And so they moved my friend Mel with me, and we moved into a new housing unit in general population, and she was my roommate for many, many years. So we kind of were together. We knew each other. We started meeting people in the unit. Mm-hmm. I went to my job. She got a job of doing the laundry or something like that. Everybody who worked, they paid you just pennies. It was not really work, Mm-hmm. It wasn't like it could support someone, right? Yeah. So maybe got $15 a month, if that.
Wow.
For my job.
Yeah.
I think it was probably about 3 years into my life sentence that they started to they were going to open a dental lab, and I had always worked for dentists my whole life. So I thought, well, maybe this would be good for me. I could work in the dental lab and see. So it was a lawsuit that the women's prison had won because they weren't allowed to have any kind of big businesses like this. So this came as a good thing for the women's prison to have. We made all the dentures for all the prisons in the state of Michigan. Cool. So I made $1.25 an hour. So for prison, that was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That was the most you could make. And that's what I did. So
Nice.
when I went to work, I worked every morning from 7 until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was off on the weekends. So this gave me something to do. When I was working, I decided to go to college. I started I started with an associate's degree. I went to school 2 or 3 nights a week, finally graduated with an associate's and started a bachelor's degree. After a few years, they took, the people on the outside didn't like the idea that prisoners could go to college for free. So they took the college out of the prison. So I had started with my bachelor's degree, and I had maybe half the credits I needed towards a bachelor's when they stopped college altogether, and I wasn't allowed to finish it.
Oh.
But it was about 7 years in. I was working, I was just maintaining, but I was praying and praying and praying that God would do something and deliver me really from this. I went to the religious services. I got what's called a religious visit. Volunteers come into the prison and visit inmates through their church. This was a Chuck Colson ministry. Now, Chuck Colson was one of the Watergate people. He went to prison and started this ministry where people would come into the prison and meet with inmates and talk about Christ and talk about, their life there and what they could do to help them. And so I thought, my aunt actually in California, Aunt Donna, signed me for this. And one of these volunteers came to visit me. And so we're in the visiting room, and she comes to visit me probably once a week or once every 2 weeks for months and months. And she realizes that I'm innocent, and she wants to do something to help me. So she writes down notes and takes down the information about my case, and she gives them to her next door neighbor, who is a law student at the University of Michigan. He took this piece of paper to his professor, who was Andrea Lyon. Andrea Lyon was then came to the prison to visit me. Now, at this point, I've been in prison for 7 years. And I've already spent, I sold my home, and I spent all the money that I had on an appeal lawyer, which was denied. My appeals were denied all the way down. Everything was denied all across the board, just denied. I had no chance at anything. So I really, after I'd lost my last appeal, I got down on my knees and I told God that if He didn't do something, I would be in prison for the rest of my life. She had her students come and visit me. And she took my transcripts, a big, huge box of transcripts, and read them all and read my trial. And she, the first time she came, she said, well, I don't think that the students can take this case. I don't think there's anything of value that they can learn from this case, but I will look at your case myself. And if there's anything I can do to help you, I will. Yeah. Because she just has the biggest heart ever.
Right.
So she took my transcripts, and it was about a week later, she came back and she told me that not only was her students going to take my case, they were going to make it their project. They were going to be taking my case and doing a whole investigation, which had never, ever been done. Yeah. No one, even my attorney, had never investigated anything, had never sent any investigators out to talk to anyone concerned, never gone to the crime scene, never did anything about, I had no defense. Yeah. He did absolutely nothing. Right. So she did this investigation. Her students came up with over 2,000 pieces of evidence that were never turned over to us.
Yeah.
They came up with all kinds of, a white substance was found at the crime scene that looked like drugs. They came up with lab work. They came up with stuff that just never was turned over to my attorneys.
Mhm.
They're called Brady violations. You have to turn things over to the defense so they can assure that a person gets a fair trial. None of that was turned over to me. None of it was turned over to my attorney. He gave us, some pages of transcripts, but that was about it. It wasn't anything, big. There was not a lie detector. What is
polygraph? Yeah.
My stalker had taken a polygraph.
Your stalker had.
My stalker had, and failed it. And they didn't say, they never told us that. There was so much information that hadn't been turned over to us.
Wow.
So,
and is that only because the non-jury trial was selected? Like, is that why it just was never turned in?
No, matter that happened. It should have been turned over and it wasn't.
Yeah.
That was grounds for a new trial. Okay. So at this point, they filed a new appeal, and this is my first habeas corpus appeal filed. It has to go right from the beginning. It has to go through the trial courts. It has to go through the appellate court of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And I lost at all of those stages. But finally, we got to the federal court, and they filed the petition with the federal court. And at this point, that is when the newspaper article came out, the one that you read,
Mm-hmm.
that described my case. And that is when my case was accepted. It was first accepted by a magistrate. And I remember praying, that God would give us a hearing before a judge.
Mm-hmm.
And after that article came out, we got a hearing before a judge, a federal judge.
Yeah.
Was going to hear my case. So this was a miracle, a total miracle of God, because there's absolutely no way I could have done this on my own. This could never have happened. I was doomed to spend the rest of my life in prison. This hearing happened in Flint. We went to this courtroom, Judge Godola. We went in, my whole family was there.
Mm-hmm.
We walked in and had this hearing. They had my attorneys up there testifying as to why they didn't put on any kind of a defense at all. And you know what their answer was? We were cocky. We didn't think we needed to do it. We didn't think they could prove she was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's why they were cocky. That's what they said in the open court. They said cocky. And meanwhile, I've spent the last, now it's 8 years in prison. So, I knew at this point that after I was convicted and after I was sent to prison, the one thing that I kept coming back to me over and over and over again was that I never testified. My attorney said, you can't testify. I won't allow you to testify. I wanted to tell my. Could you say that again? My apologies. I didn't say anything, Siri.
Siri's listening. Could you repeat that?
So the judge, the one thing that I had completely felt that I failed at was that I never testified for myself. Mm-hmm. I never stood up. I never fought. I was like a sheep going to slaughter. I just let them do this to me. Mm-hmm. And every night I would lay in my bunk and I would testify. Every night I would say what I would have said if I had just testified. So this was my chance. Mm-hmm. Andrea Lyon put me on the stand and let me testify. And I started to tell them about what was going on in my life. I started to tell them that I believed in Jesus Christ. And I was, the prosecutor got up and said horrible things to me. It was just terrible.
Yeah.
But
this was the one before you eventually got out. This was the one where we were all there and he was like firing at you. Like,
he was firing questions at me.
Yeah. And he was trying to do sneak attacks too. Like, and then that's when you killed him, right? And you're like, I did not do it. Like, and I remember everyone in the whole thing they were like, oh, like everyone was so like mad that he would like.
One thing I knew, I felt it when I was testifying, was that the judge, I could feel him starting to be on my side. Mm-hmm. I could feel him changing his idea. I could feel it in my bones that he knew I was innocent. I could feel it. I could feel the whole courtroom change. It was just amazing. Wow. That after I testified, I went back to the prison. I was driving back to the prison, and I just had a peace about me, because I just felt that if Judge Godola could do anything, he would. Mm-hmm. That I knew that this was going to turn out good. I just felt it in my bones. I just felt like, if he could overturn this, if there's any grounds, he will do it. So I was back in the prison probably for, I don't know, I would say it could have been weeks. I'm not sure. Probably, yeah, it was probably, we went to the hearing in the spring. So it was probably in the summer. Mm-hmm. And I got word that he had overturned my conviction. He had granted me a new trial. And it was just like, it was like a miracle from God. Yeah. It wasn't from God. I was getting out. I needed a bond. So my sister and her husband put their house up for a bond. So I could get out. People helped, they were all came to the prison that day. The newspaper were there, the people, the 48 Hours was there, video. They wanted to do a story. Mm-hmm. It never happened. For some reason, they didn't want to do the story after I got out. I don't know why, but it didn't work out, which was fine with me. I was out of prison, and I thought, oh, this is the most amazing thing. Now we'll have a real trial. Now I can prove that I'm innocent now, so I got out of prison, and during the time that I was gone, computers had just begun.
Oh man.
When I went in there, nobody, cell phones were this big. They were huge. You carried it was like a big paper. When I got out, cell phones were little, and everyone had one. And I remember sitting in the car, calling in the next car over to my sister in the next car and talking to her on the phone.
This is crazy.
This is crazy. We had a party, and it was so much fun. I went shopping. I got new clothes because I didn't have anything to wear. Everything was so strange and different. People had grown up. I had, my son got married. My son graduated. He was graduated from college. My younger son had a baby, and him and his girlfriend were together. And, it was just like, there were so many things, so much of their lives that I had missed.
Yeah.
Just getting to know them a little bit was, it was just amazing. It was just an amazing time in my life. So
we got the retrial. Ooh, yeah, the retrial,
Good stopping point.
Okay, perfect.
This is good. Then I can, it's hard.
Yeah.
But I started writing a book.
As you should.
For the last 12 years.
Yeah.
And I get to the point of my trial and I can't go any further.
Really?
Just because it's so much. It's so heavy on me. It's so hard. Yeah. I think there's a way of getting my book out without without going through that. So it's a good thing for me.
Okay, good. Yeah, because I completely understand how it makes you revisit these feelings, and it's so hard,
to understand what I went through, and at the time what kind of person I was. I was just a meek person. I didn't have any character. I was very, very,
well, it's hard though, because especially with the whirlwind that you went through in the beginning of the trial, like you think you can trust these people, and like you don't know what's going on, and people are telling you what to do. And
I had no idea I couldn't trust the police.
Yeah. And you don't know that until you're in it and you're like, I can't trust the police. I
had no idea that they were out to get me. I had no idea. So if for that much alone, if somebody knows that they don't talk to the police without an attorney, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
That from this.
Totally. Yeah. And like, because I just watch so much crime TV, and just like from my schooling, everything, it's like, no, never talk to them without a lawyer. But like, you don't know that.
There's all these other feelings going through your mind that I want to help them. Someone did. I need to help them. I need to tell them stuff. They need to know about this. They need to know about that.
Totally.
And, yeah.
Well, and even so, say if something happens, like I feel like my first thought, like something horrible happens to someone you care about, my first thought isn't like, all right, I need to find a lawyer first.
Lawyer. Yeah, no.
Where's my lawyer? Because then I'll speak, That's not like at all. So I think it's so awful what happened, because like these are the people we're supposed to trust, but they're doing mind tricks and they're putting you in these small rooms.
And they're making you feel like if you ask for a lawyer, then you must be guilty.
Right. Like, why do you need a lawyer?
I need a lawyer.
Yeah, totally. So I can, and these people are professionals, but like, that's their job to do it. And like, if you've never even, I've never even talked to a police officer,
I've never even talked to a policeman other than at my sister's ball games.
Right. Yeah.
And they were all, drunk.
Yeah. Like and just like casual hanging out, so for someone's like, that's their job to like trick people, which it comes in handy for like the bad people. But
if they're, trying to find out who really did it, they have to use some tools, but I just was unaware. That's all. I just was naive and stupid about it, really.
No,
I didn't think.
I think it would happen to anyone in that situation. Like,
the problem is it could happen to anyone. It could happen to you. It could happen, it could happen to anyone, your sister, your mother, it could happen to anyone.
Right.
Because you just don't know. You just don't know what they're doing, and I just didn't know.
Yeah.
So,
and you're right. It was the perfect storm, especially with everything that happens, which we'll get into, but yeah, perfect storm. Oh, it's just crazy. Yeah. That's why it's such a powerful story. And that's why I appreciate you talking about it with me. I know it's so hard to like have to go through piece by piece of it too. Yeah. So I really appreciate you taking the time with me to do it at all. And I think a lot of people can sympathize with it too, especially me, because like you said, like it could happen to anyone. And if it were any of us, it would be the same thing. It'd be like, wait, who do I talk to? Wait, what happened? Wait, what did I hear? And then,
it's surprising now because I'm friends on Facebook with the Innocence Project. Mm-hmm. And people get exonerated monthly for things they didn't do, and with the advent of DNA evidence, so many people have been found innocent after they've been in prison for many, many, many years. So, this is not something that never happens.
Right.
This is something that could happen to you.
Right.
It could happen to anyone that you know. Totally. So,
and whereas it's like a great thing that people are getting out, but it also highlights how bad it is that there's so many people that this happened to. And
all those years of my life, I lost all those years with my children, all those years that I could have been earning Right now I don't get Social Security. I get a little bit, but not very much, because there were so many years that, I made income, but it wasn't, I never put anything into Social Security because I was in prison there. So, there's so many, so many things. So we will continue.
Okay. Yes, we will. Thank you so much.
It's not over.
It's not over. It's not over. It keeps going.
Not over.
No, thank you so much again. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.